In this lesson, we are going to talk all about 5 different ways you can use stamping on your projects. On my layout here, I have used stamping to create a background paper. I've also done some masking stamping on my layout. We've used sentiment stamps to add some bits of journaling to the project. I've done a little bit of a watercolor technique using some stamps. And then we've used stamps images to trim out and use as an embellishment. For this technique, we are going to create our own stamped background, basically create our own pattern paper using a stamped image. So what I have here is this large background stamp, and I'm just going to add it to my large stamping block. And I have a piece of cardstock, and we're going to create this background we have here on the layout. Because I'm just using a small square, I don't need to ink the whole thing, but I'm just going to ink it directly onto the stamp because it is pretty large. And I find that doing it this way, I can see where I've added the ink and where it's not taking it. And I can actually see that it's bubbled a bit inside. So I'm just going to lift that up. And I'm doing this on a craft mat because this is such a large stamp. It's going to overhang my piece of paper, and that's completely fine. But you want to make sure you do that so you don't make a mess of your counter. Then you just want to line it up, push down. And there's your stamped image. So you could virtually change this up with any color of ink, any pattern of stamp that you have. You could do even a repetitive, smaller stamp and do the same thing, and it looks really fun on a layout. For this technique, we are going to use a mask to create a stamped image. So what I have here is a piece of cardstock and another piece of cardstock where I've die cut out a heart shape. You could do this with any shape, circle, square, frame, anything you want. And I'm just going to lie my die cut area over top the center of my plain cardstock. And I have a background stamp. This is just a polka dot. You could use any sort of pattern you wanted. And I'm just going to ink it up here. Just want to make sure you have the ink completely covering it. And then you want to flip it over. I'm going to do mine on a bit of a diagonal for something different, but you could put the stamp any way you wanted. You just want to press down, and when you lift it up, you'll see you have a heart shape left over. Now on my project, I added some stitching around it, but you could definitely leave it as it is. You could add hand stitching, you could machine stitch, you could even just take a journaling pen and go around. For this technique, we're going to create our own embellishments. So we have these floral stamps here, and I'm just going to stamp it with some ink onto a piece of white cardstock. Stamp a few different times. And then we're just going to trim around. And what I like to do is leave a little bit of an overhang around the edge of each of the stamped images. And that's just to make sure I don't destroy the image of the stamp. So I maintain the shape of the flower and go all the way around. And what's good about this is you can vary the size of your stamp, use a smaller flower for the center, as I've done on my layout, and layer them together to create your own unique flower. So it's not just the one image, you're actually building on it to create something a little special. Okay, so there you go. And one thing I like to do is take a pencil and just curl the edges slightly so that when you put it on your layout, it has a little more shape to it than just a flat stamped image. So if you take a 3D dot, a foam dimensional dot, and add it on your page, it looks more like a 3D embellishment. You can add enamel dots to the center of it to add a little fun to it. And it's ready for your project. For this technique, we are going to use journaling stamps to add a sentiment to our project. So we're actually going to use vellum for this, and we need a special ink to stamp onto the vellum. So we're going to use this StazOn ink. It adheres really well to slippery surfaces such as vellum. So I just have my stamp here and the StazOn. I'm just going to ink up the stamp. And you want to hold it in place because this is a bit of a slipperier surface. You want to just be a little careful when you put it down. And hold it in place. And when you lift it up, it's perfectly done. Now you have to be careful because it is a little bit wet on the top of the surface, so you don't want to touch it right away. You can actually see on the vellum that it's a little bit shiny, so you want to be careful. And if you want to create a little bit of a pennant shape, you can just take the edge of your scissors while it's drying cut down the middle, and then cut a little edge out of each corner. And it's perfect to tuck underneath something like those embellishments here on my layout. For this technique, I'm going to show you how to create your own watercolor stamped background. So on my layout here, we have, you can see here in the background, we've stamped and then we've added watercolors to the inside. So I'm going to show you how we did that. So all you need are some stamps and some ink, and you also need some watercolors. So I'm just going to go ahead and start stamping my image. I'm going to stamp it on a bit of an angle just for fun. And I'm just going to stamp the whole thing to fill the card. And I'm slightly altering, staggering where I have the word used so it doesn't completely perfectly line up. And don't worry too much about it being a little crooked because it's going to be layered underneath something on the project. Okay, so I'm also going to add some stamps in later, so I'm just going to put this off to the side. Now we're going to do a little bit of watercolor painting, and the trick to this is to start slow and add a little bit and then layer more on top. So I just have this white cardstock, and I'm going to start with a light pink color. I'm just going to gently add some light pink inside. I'm really doing it messy. I'm not being super particular. I'm going over the edges even of the stamp. I'm not really being very careful at all. I'm going to go in again with a different darker shade of pink, so I'm starting with the lighter shade first, and I kind of want this to have a bit of an artsy kind of feel to it. So you can use, this water pen has water inside of it, so you just have to squeeze on it and we'll add more water if you need more water, versus having to go to a little bucket of water. So once you get all this filled in with the lighter color as you like it, you can go in with another color and just take a tiny little bit and add over top. So I'm just going to add this brighter pink here, some of the areas, just to highlight some in a darker shade. It's a really, really easy way to get a different shaded variation instead of having to play around with a lot of mists or different stamping colors. And it's completely unique. You could change this up, make it a different color, and you have a totally different look to your stamped image. And then to finish off our pattern of paper, so to speak, I'm just going to take a little tiny heart stamp and stamp in between all the little words. It's just really faint, so you can see the difference. And that's it. So that's 5 easy ways you can integrate different stamping ideas into your scrapbook projects.